I was talking about the drivers for the funding request related to our existing wastewater treatment facility. The town entered into a settlement agreement with the DEP at the end of last year, and that settlement agreement required several things of the town. One was upgrade of the the flow measurement system, the effluent flow measurement system at our wastewater treatment facility. And another was optimization of the nitrogen removal process at the wastewater treatment facility. There are other items as well, but these two require immediate action, which I'll discuss on the next slide. We also needed, obviously, to go through as part of the preliminary designing and planning of the Little Pond sewer service area expansion, need to step back and take a look at our plant. And this plant was designed for additional flow and load, but we did have to reevaluate our existing design, knowing what we know now about our operations. And there are a couple of minor adjustments that may need to be made at our plant to accommodate additional flow and load. And there are other process improvement requirements of the plant, most notably odor control at the service road vent, which is, I'm sure you're familiar with, has been an ongoing issue with neighbors, and that's on the road leading up to our treatment plant. Next slide. So the $800,000 request is broken down into two pieces. The first is design and construction of the effluent flow measurement upgrade that I mentioned. That is a specific requirement of our settlement agreement with the DEP. Our effluent flow measurement system has not been sufficiently accurate or reliable, and this first, the $350,000 would both design and construct that upgrade. The second part of the request is for $450,000 to design the additional wastewater treatment facility upgrades. We would then come back in either the fall town meeting in this year, or more likely in April town meeting of 2014, to request funding to implement those upgrades that I'm discussing. And at this point, the estimate, obviously, we're requesting money for the designs. We don't have a final number on construction, but at this point it's estimated to be about $4.5 million that we'd be requesting in the future. So the total for these items is $800,000.
Okay.
Virginia's going to come on and speak a little bit about the financing schedule, but I would just like to report to the chairman that your strong request to our committee some time ago that we not view the $9 million window of opportunity as ours alone was heeded, and I think our requests are slightly more than half of the $9 million window of opportunity, which leaves room for Amy's plant improvements and leaves room for any water filtration or treatment system that the town chooses within that window.
Great.
So we heeded your direction.
Thank you. Virginia?
Excellent. In the process of the evening, I've nearly lost my voice. The last slides put the projects you've just heard about into context. We're working on a multi-year issue. This is what's going to happen in these next 2 years. We're discussing now the April town meeting, Articles 24 and the water is 25, and a ballot question in May. Immediately after the decision of the town on those design costs, which we hope is positive, we will be embarking on a discussion townwide about the funding and the financing and how we put all of the different pieces together. It's going to be a wide conversation involving any stakeholder that perceives him or herself as a stakeholder. The selectmen, obviously the town manager, and the finance committee. And a year from now, in April, we will come back with the decision on the financing for the construction of the elements of the wastewater system that are needed. And that will again be followed by a ballot question. Next slide. This is just a brief bullet of the kinds of financing questions that we hear and that we will need to deal with. Whether there will be any state help, federal help, faint. Borrowing terms could be for 20 years or 30 years. Betterments are the question that all residents ask, and that obviously has a wide spectrum. Payment schedule would do also with whether residents could pay back over a longer period of time if there is a betterment. And the last bullet, the state does have potential to offer us a 0% loan as opposed to a 2% loan, but it requires additional effort, decisions on the part of the town, and controls on the flow of water that is used in households. That is a decision that the town needs to make, and all of these will be decided and discussed during this next year. Last slide is, I am sure this is what most people think. There's just so much out there, and how are we ever going to get from where we are to the end? But I honestly believe we've made so much progress since the wastewater burst onto the town's plate at $650 million. And I really think that the dialogue that we have now with the community and the working together with the selectmen and the finance committee and all interested parties, that we can sort this out. And we look forward to doing that. Thank you. Sorry for my voice.
Thank you, Virginia. Questions from the board before? Go ahead.
I have a few questions. The low-pressure system that was mentioned, the way you described it, it sounded like we were talking about macerators. Is that correct? You're saying it was going to chop it up and pump it?
It's similar to that. The town actually has some of these in place in small areas of the town. The committee took a trip to the two towns in Martha's Vineyard that have had it in place for 10 years, with several hundred homes serviced this way. So we actually got to see what gets installed in the ground. We got to talk to the people who maintain them and found out what the demands are on them. We came away very impressed. Oak Bluffs, I believe, had like 400 homes that were serviced with these things. They get one service call a month, and it's usually because some tin soldier has been dropped down into the toilet or something, something major like that. But very, very low maintenance. And
how many of these would be needed?
For the area we're talking about, it's roughly half, so maybe 600. Is that the fair number? 600.
What kind of costs are? Obviously, they run off electricity. Who
Right.
pays for the electricity? Is it the homeowner, or is there a meter that the town has to run?
The homeowner, it would come off of the homeowner's electricity, but we talked about this with Ray, and the monthly or the annual sewer charge could be adjusted to reflect a different charge for people who were supplying electricity versus the people who had a gravity system and weren't. So that factor would and should be thought about when you're setting rates.
This being the biggest part of this whole plan, and I understand obviously we're trying to move ahead with all of this, but I guess one of my questions about the process of designing a sewer system for the Little Pond area is, why aren't we waiting to see the results of some of these pilots? For example, we're talking about widening Bourne's Pond, and that's the biggest bang for the buck. Why aren't we talking about widening Little Pond? Why aren't we waiting to see the results of the oyster aquaculture there, as opposed to starting a $4.5 million design that might not be needed?
A couple of reasons. I think one answer is obviously that even if you open the inlet and even if the oysters work, Little Pond is so badly impacted, and in the absence of sewering that area, it would remain impacted, even if the oysters did their job, hopefully as much as you want them to. No feasible solution appeared to be workable for Little Pond that didn't involve some sewering. The other reason, quite frankly, is the package that you approved, the water package that we sent to the state, it was pushing the envelope already by saying, we're only going to sewer this area, and we're going to do all these experiments in all the other areas. If we had sent a package up there that said, well, we're really not going to sewer anything, we're just going to do these experiments and see what happens, I think that package would have been dead on arrival. We have to show a certain level of deference to the regulators who are breathing down our necks on this subject. And, quite frankly, we pushed the envelope in the package that went to them. I think if we come in with no sewering, it would not have passed the laugh test up at any level of regulation.
I guess I'm not saying no sewering, but I'm saying we've got half a dozen different pilot projects that are in progress right now. I'm just questioning why we want to spend $4.5 million to design this without getting the results from some of those pilot projects back first. And, with due respect to the state, obviously, I'm not saying we're going to toss this, but I'm saying let's prioritize things and get some results back before we're spending millions of dollars on a design that may not be needed. Maybe it might not be as extensive, maybe it might not. I know, Mr. Potamus, but you'd call me a skeptic. For the audience at home can't see Jerry shaking his head, but the reality is that I think we need to explore and exhaust these options before we start putting pipes into the ground, and I guess that's where I'm raising some objections to this. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Anybody else on the board? Public comment. Bernard.
Just a small comment on this. They're in the process of rebuilding the bog in Coonamessett to attenuate some nitrogen out of there. I think that it's would be beneficial as well to try to reestablish the wetland in the lower end of the golf course, as well as to throw the whole CPC project out at Little Pond and bring that back to the bog that it once was. That would have a serious positive effect on what's going on in Little Pond, as opposed to parking another 80 cars there, a short distance from the water. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else in public comment? Okay, next up then would be Jennifer Petit, our finance director.
Good evening. Thank you. As we approach town meeting, the annual town meeting, we're talking about capital projects, particularly bonding projects. I like to present them together in how they would impact the tax rate as a whole and how we would approach funding these and talk about it with the community. And this is really the first step in doing that. And as you've heard tonight, we have 2 major capital projects on the town meeting, the annual town meeting. And really tonight what we're looking for is the money for design. We're not looking for construction costs, although we want to know potentially what the whole impact would be. But right now we just really want to focus on design. Next slide, please. So as we've just discussed, the water quality permitting and design is $4.8 million. The wastewater treatment plant design and upgrade is $800,000, and the water treatment design is $3.4 million. And although these are 2 separate projects, 2 separate town meeting warrant articles, we do want to talk about or discuss the impact of them together because they both would be borrowing articles. Next slide, please. When I approach a capital project, we always want to talk with the department heads and discuss what their plan is and their when they plan the project and what the timetable is. And so the timeline, the permitting and design for all the projects to be completed would be to be completed by June 30th, 2015 in order to meet the SRF construction funding notice to proceed stipulations. One thing that we really do want to look into is the Mass Water Pollution Abatement Trust, because we could be eligible for 0%, which would be great, or 2%, which still is really a low rate. If you're going out to the market to borrow, you're probably looking right now, long-term, the rates are pretty low, maybe 2.5, 3. That's just a best guess. So you really want to maximize your borrowing capability. Next slide,
What's
please.
the SRF?
Excuse me. We're not taking questions in the middle of our thing. Thank you very much. All right, you get to answer a question. You know what our policy here is about, speaker policy as well as attendees, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. And this is a spreadsheet that I put together, and this is a spreadsheet that you'll be seeing in the future. So I'm going to introduce it tonight, and this is really what I look at when we talk about using debt drop-off and what we've discussed as the window of opportunity. You know, we want to look at our excluded debt, what we've voted already that's over 2.5. And as our excluded debt drops off, it does create a window where we can put in new projects without spiking the tax levy. And we've discussed this in the past, so I just wanted to present this to everyone. And right now, in 2013, our existing exempt debt is about $10.3 million. And so that's what we're paying, and that's when we set our tax rate, was $10.3 million in exempt debt. So when we look at 2014, I go through the debt schedule, and I put in the exempt debt. So it would decrease to 8.6 in 2014. We have some debt drop-off. And in 2014, with the budget that was presented, we are looking at paying off $1.7 million of the $2.7 million that was voted at Article 17 that we've discussed that had alternate projects and some design for your wastewater. So we'll be paying that off, and we won't be bonding it. And we'll be, I think our interest rates are so low right now, especially in short-term debt, you're probably looking at about 0.5%. So you're really saving significantly because you're not going to the market to borrow long-term. And so what I do is if you add it across, it shows you the available annual capacity. And so this is a spreadsheet that I work with when I do present capital projects to make sure that we're in the levy limit and we're not spiking the levy limit. And so I took the timetable and I kind of put it in the spreadsheet of what really would work. And so as we go out to 2015, we'd borrow $2.3 million and we would pay it off. We'd actually borrow it in 2014 and pay it off in 2015. One thing to remember is when we get the borrowing authorization at town meeting, we get it in April and then we go to the ballot and it's approved, we probably would borrow the money in the next fiscal year, but we wouldn't pay interest until the fiscal year after that. So that's why you see it go out to 2018. And with the $9 million, I've was able to take the 2.3, the 2.5, and the 3, which leaves a remainder of about 1.2 million that didn't really fit in that $9 million capacity, and we would borrow that. So the first principal and interest payment on 2018 would be $84,000. And when you see the short-term interest column, I'm looking at about the interest rates are so low. Will they be low in 2016? I don't know. They've been low for the last few years, so we'll project it that way. Plus, we still have some capacity on the far right. So I put that into the short-term interest. So as you can see on the far right, we're still within our levy capacity with these projects. You know, that doesn't include, you know, when the selectmen adopt a budget policy in November, they look at raising, using the 2.5%. This is strictly for excluded debt. So I'd like to point out in 2018, if you look in the far right column, our capacity is 2.9 million. So when we come back to you again, if this is endorsed and positively voted for at town meeting and it passes the ballot and we want to proceed with construction after design, then we will do a financing schedule of all the things that Virginia spoke about, and then we would look at water treatment as well, if that's, you know, if that's part of it, or either or, and we would start putting out a schedule that would start fitting in that 2.9 million. And I'll go out probably 20 or 30 years with the state revolving fund if that's an issue, or, you know, if we do regular bonding. And I'll show you what the impact will be on the tax rate. We'll look at betterments, we'll look at, you know, 25, 50, 75. We can look at all these different scenarios and see what the effect would be. Next slide, please. So One thing I just want to remind everybody with capital project planning, right now, this is a plan. This is what we know right now. But when we enter into a capital project, we all know things change. And so, but this is a good planning tool to tell everyone, this is what we expect right now. And as the plan changes, we'll let you know and we'll update the figures. And so we want to use that window of opportunity, the debt drop-off, that's a good approach for capital projects, all capital projects, that we would look at borrowing authorization. We want to look at taxpayer impact, but we also want to be mindful of flexibility, that when we come back and we might update this and we start looking at construction costs, we need to be flexible. We need to be flexible with the way we're managing a construction project. We want to be able to manage cash flow. We don't want to borrow too much. We don't want to borrow too little. We really want to be able to manage that project within the confines of managing and constructing the whole project. So this is, something that, I'm excited about at least presenting. So when we come back with other capital projects, I would probably present it, or I definitely would present it in the same manner. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Jennifer?
No, but I just want to say that's extremely helpful to have that information,
Right.
so we really know where we are.
In one of the issues that is Eric, brought up earlier, is that we're not necessarily earmarking all of our future debt drop-off for just wastewater. We have a multitude of capital needs in this community, so I
That's
just
correct.
want to read.
And I'll present them all in the same manner.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Anyone else? Okay, public. Heather?
I'm sorry, it's okay, I'm sorry to do this so late in the evening, but
No,
the one thing that isn't demonstrated here, we probably should have included is just a slide on what is the impact to the taxpayer as a result of if the town chose to endorse both the design for wastewater and the design for water. What is the tax increase?
If we could go back one slide, the available annual capacity, that's positive. So after planning the way that I've projected that we would approach the 9 million, we still have capacity, so there wouldn't be an impact to the taxpayer within the debt drop-off. If we don't let the debt drop off, there is no impact.
Okay. But the key question here, though, too, and I think we need to address this, folks are going to go to the ballot box to see whether we're going to keep our taxes the same as we are now, or they would drop if they don't approve this. The key question is, how much for the average household is this $9 million going to represent? I mean, we need to be able to explain that to folks, okay? Any other questions from the board? Any public comment? If you'd like to come up and ask the question, you'd be more than happy to do so, Mr. McDonald. Okay, all right. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. This is a rather large item. I did put on the agenda that we could discuss and vote, but I think what we will do is take the vote up next week when we make our recommendations for town meeting, and maybe the board can circulate any of your questions, concerns to the town manager, and he'll decipher those questions, concerns back to the folks here. We know what they're asking for. We know what the two articles represent, and maybe Heather can formulate if anyone has any questions about the recommendations as we move forward for next week, because we will be making recommendations on both of these articles at next week's meeting. Okay, unless there's anything else on that, thank you very much. Appreciate you staying to this late hour. Next up is just a little update to the Board of Selectmen on the meeting with the state and in regard to financial assistance with the vote that the Board of Selectmen took to dismantle, decommission both Win 1 and Win 2 to move forward with the articles at town meeting, and just a quick update on where we stand, whether we've made contacts. I'll have Mr. Suso make that, address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. with the very helpful assistance of Selectwoman Pat Flynn, as the board is aware. Also, Selectman Doug Jones, Heather Harper, and I met with multiple representatives from the state of Massachusetts regarding potential state financial assistance to the town in regard to the Selectmen's decision to dismantle and remove both turbines as determined recently. We presented that group at the meeting with the wind turbine options report information. Many of them were familiar with that already, and related background information. Our meeting was very cordial. We did emphasize the very tight schedule with which the board is working with regard to the upcoming annual and special town meetings. We were advised that they will be taking matters under review and advisement that is underway as we speak, and they will, the representatives of the state will be getting back to us. At our meeting, they made no firm commitment or regarding any specific item, taking it all into account, however, and nor did they make any firm commitment on precise response time. So that process, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, continues to unfold, and we continue to stay in touch with those representatives and answer questions as they arise.
I appreciate both Selectman Flynn and Selectman Jones participating. It was appropriate to have both of those select people participate because they've been involved in the WTOP process moving forward, and hopefully the state can assist the town and find its way to help us in some form or fashion. I know that we've had that meeting and proposed that. I know that folks in the community were made some promises over the periods of time that the state would participate, and if you were made some promises, I think now is the appropriate time to write those folks letters and to ask them to make good on those promises, because the community itself, meaning the management of this community, the town manager, assistant town manager, and the two select people have engaged them and started the process. So any external pressure that any of you folks were made, were promised, would be an appropriate time now, I think, for you to talk to your state legislators or state representatives or whoever they may have been, elected officials, because those were the folks that may have made individual promises to you. They have not made them to this board, and we've started to engage them, and that's the appropriate process, I think, as we move forward. We want this sooner versus later. The board will be making recommendations next week. We would hope to have the information. Not that I'm a skeptic, but I think the timeline is very, very narrow to have this information. So, but we do have until town meeting to make a recommendation on this particular this particular article, meaning the dollars and cents of the article, how much this would actually cost. Okay? So does anyone else have anything else to say in that regard? Okay? All right. Next up is board discussion of a town meeting warrant recommendations. We're not making the recommendations this evening. We're looking for a little bit of input from the board, because Heather will be, is it Heather or Julian, or a combination of both of them, will be actually making the recommendations for town meeting, and next week, so the board will be taking those up. So we need to go through them, if I can find the information. We have so much paper tonight. Oh, great. Thank you. The first article would be Article number 8, which would be the county road, pardon me.
It's in green.
Annual town meetings in green and the specials in blue.
Okay.
And we do vote our positions tonight, though, don't we?
No, we don't vote our positions. We're gonna try to give her some, the town manager in here, some guidance to write the recommendations.
I thought we vote the position and then
We-
vote the recommendation next week.
I thought we voted this already, and now the technician's back in here again. That was removed. We voted that down. I thought we voted 18 already. In fact, we removed the technician from it.
Let's stay with one article at a time, and then we'll get to that, okay? Because we'll be able to explain that a little bit easier. Article 10, see if the town will vote to update the following goals and policies of the local comprehensive plan dated April 2005. This was for goals for water and sewer element, and the policies of water and sewer element.
Energy.
I'm sorry, yep. Policies for energy, economic sustainability element, and public policy statement for economic and sustainability element as well. Does the board have any feelings one way or another about how we would make a recommendation? This was something that was accomplished, I believe, by a committee, specifically the planning board, that was tasked, but this is the Board of Selectmen's recommendations.
And so the explanation would come under our verbiage as opposed to
We,
the planning
we,
board?
we need to make a positive motion, as well as a recommendation on this. I believe this is a joint recommendation, am I mistaken here? It's not a planning board article?
We will receive guidance from the planning board, planning staff.
Okay,
It's a Board of Selectmen made motion and recommendation.
right. So, shall we have them write a positive motion in regard to this? Does anyone have any specifics that they'd like to amend it?
I had no objections to it as written.
No, I think we can ask them to write very positive recommendations.
Okay,
Some of them are a little more specific than others, but I think they say what needs to be said.
okay, now, then we'll move on to number 11. We're trying to give both the town manager and assistant town manager some guidance here. Article 11 is the article about a part-time inspector of buildings, and building commissioners, and it's basically work that they can do within the community.
This is legal housekeeping from
Right.
town council.
So, may we suggest that we just write a positive motion on this?
So,
To explain it, I think,
Right.
if they're part-time, it means they can have current jobs in the areas in which they're inspecting.
I don't like it.
That's really the intent of this article, that if you have a job in construction or in repairs or demolition work or anything like that, you can be hired by the town as a part-time inspector,
But you can't inspect your own work.
Correct.
but you can't inspect your own work, exactly.
Mr. Chairman?
So,
Yes.
Is this within the town of Falmouth, or is this anywhere? I mean, are they currently prevented from doing any work anywhere, or just within the town in which they're employed? And I ask that question because if they can do work in their field in other communities, then it sounds like the wording of this would allow them to do work in Falmouth as long as it's not for their own jobs. And while I understand the logic behind that, I can see there might be concerns raised about conflicts of interest where an inspector is basically competing with other individuals in the town, potentially for work. There's an appearance there that I have a problem with, and whether it's real or imagined, I think as long as, and if there's an inspector, a part-time inspector employed by the town, and they can do work outside the town without concern at this point, I'd say that's adequate. And there's nothing stopping them, for example, they're employed in Falmouth. If there's nothing stopping them from working in Bourne or Mashpee or Sandwich, they can still be employed, they can still practice their trade, they just can't practice it in Falmouth. And if that's the current status, then I like the status quo, I guess is what I'm getting to.
Maybe we can find out who
What was
put
the origin
forward
of
this
this article?
article. Was it, this came from the building department,
I think it said Frank Duffy.
Town council.
town council, the reasoning for that, and whether this is something that
Yeah, I don't know.
we need to.
So if someone applied for the position of a part-time inspector, it would be personnel who might say, you would be prohibited from inspecting any, if they lived in Falmouth, they'd be prohibited from inspecting anything that they were connected with in terms of their private work. Is that what this really means?
That's our understanding, yes.
So I guess the question is, how do you monitor and enforce that? I don't know, that could be a problem.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
And to that end, I mean, one of the questions that I think would be raised, one of the questions that certainly raises in my mind is, how can you have impartial inspections? You know, obviously, this person is going to be, let's say they're doing work in the town, they're going to be going to their boss or coworker saying, I need you to inspect this job for me. In the back of my mind, there are questions that I have about favoritism, about, and even if it's something as simple as, oh, can you get me on the schedule tomorrow, when anybody else might come through the door and they'll get on the schedule next week. I mean, how can you oversee or prevent that sort of thing from happening, I guess? And those are the questions that I have in my mind if we're going to allow this sort of thing.
I don't know whether it was a policy or not, but in the past, there was a policy that, I know we had a plumbing inspector who was not allowed to do any work in the town of Falmouth. He was part-time, he worked elsewhere, but maybe we need clarification from town council on this.
We'll get that
And I
from you.
Okay.
guess my question is this because they're hard to find, so that we need to make these accommodations? Or, I mean, I could see if it were difficult to hire part-time inspectors, and we were doing this because the market wasn't that great. But if there's a great market out there, then I don't know why we'd have to do this. And I would think that rather it being something passed by town meeting, it would be really the best judgment of the person who's with the positions to make that determination, rather than having it as an article.
Apparently that's required under the statute, that's the
It
reason.
is? Oh, because of the inspection
That's the reason
piece,
Frank's brought it
probably.
forward.
So if we can get some clarification from town
Yeah.
council?
Will do.
Okay, and if you can send the information to the board, and then the board has any additional questions, they can contact both of you in regard to that. Okay, Article 12, town asks the selectmen to devise a method to reduce the rate of CPA taxation to fund only existing obligations, therefore creating the opportunity to fund capital projects without raising the rate of tax obligation. Do not take any other action on the request of Mark Finneran and others.
Well, it sounds sort of redundant, seeing as we'd be asking ourselves to do this, but I like the idea. I think it should be explored.
It says devise the method to reduce the rate of CPA taxation.
Devise a method to reduce it. I think the question is, can you reduce it? Not,
I think the
I
only
mean, you
way,
can reduce it if you don't have any, we probably need a more firm opinion from council. If there's already borrowing and the rate is necessary because of the borrowing, then there's no point in even having, in doing it. But if there is a possibility to reduce it, then what would that process be? And
the
I
only way you
guess
could
we
do it is
need-
by a home rule petition.
Pardon?
The way the law is written right now, the way that this was established, we can't change it in 2020, but we might be able to via home rule petition.
Now,
I mean, you'd have to go to the state legislature to get the state legislatures to
To
say
change
that
it.
there was a change in the law.
Right, so why don't we ask town council
Yeah.
the process of how the selectmen devise a method to reduce the rate of the CPA taxation, okay? And, again, if you can get that information to the board, if there's any questions on,
But do we need to have a vote as to whether we're recommending that, not to have an explanation? If our vote's a negative recommendation on this, that would change what recommendation we'd be writing.
right, that's what I'm saying, though, if town council tells us you can do it, we could do it, we might take one recommendation.
I don't think he's going to offer that opinion. I think
Okay.
that would be left to the Attorney General if town meeting in its wisdom decided to pursue this. I don't think
But-
town council would rule something out of order that was a petition article.
Maybe we could have, maybe Jennifer Petit look at it and say, if we were to reduce it, would that then extend the period of time in which we have to pay back the monies we borrowed? Right now, I think it was a 20-year.
Well, we,
Okay, what'd you say, Heather?
well, obviously, we have obligations under the Land Bank Act.
Right.
That we have to meet and we're obligated to pay. In addition to that, there's the state surplus that we have benefited from because we raised the CPA under the full legislation. And so the question really remains is what's the difference between what we have committed under the land bank and then where the state match kicks in? And so we could do a financial analysis, but the question really remains, is this something the board wants to consider?
And I'm trying to remember, and I don't know if Mr. Jones has some recollection of this, but we did actually have Jennifer Petit. She had looked at this, but I cannot recall.
It's about 2% that is committed already to land bank funds, that we already have that debt. And there's about a 1%, the 1%'s left over.
So there is wiggle room.
But that 1%'s also what we get in matching funds, so there is room there if the law would allow us to do it.
Yeah, so that maybe we want to get the details from Jennifer
Okay.
so that the board has that information, but
Well,
there may be wiggle room there, I guess is the, and that was my recollection of it, was that there was some, not a lot, but there's a potential.
All right. Article 13, shall the town meeting members be required to sit in areas designated by precinct, therefore promoting the openness and public accountability prescribed within the Constitution of the United States under Article 4, Section 5, Paragraph 3, do it take any on the request of Mark Finneran and others.
I'd leave that up to town meeting.
I'd like to recommend it. I'd like to recommend it. I know there's been discussion in years past about having some sort of means to track individual votes within town meeting. And obviously there's a certain expense associated with some sort of a device that would allow you to, you push a button or something to that effect that they have in Congress or at the State House that allows you to determine who votes how for, each roll call. This is one of those things that there's no cost to it, but it's certainly easier if you're watching on TV or if you're in the audience, you can see, okay, well, there's precinct 9, and I can see all my representatives for precinct 9, and I can see who's standing up and who isn't. Whereas right now, if there's a standing voice vote or standing count, everybody's scattered across the room, and you have no idea how your precinct is voting, so.
Well, let me give you a little different perspective of how I see it, is that quote-unquote town meeting members are elected officials. And an elected official should, specifically for town meeting members are elected for a certain precinct. I think that those town meeting members should try to develop relationships within the community that they can try to garner votes to help benefit their particular precinct. If you keep them all segregated, you're going to have a divided community. The more divided we are, the more
I don't get it.
dysfunctional. What you don't get is, I'm a precinct meeting member in precinct 5.
Yeah.
If I sit with folks from precinct 3 or 4, I can sit with them and try to explain to them why a certain article, which might not represent or mean anything to them, might benefit precinct 5, and it might mean nothing to them.
Well, I had, being a town meeting member, I'd go, and I'd have conversations about that out in the hallways. I wouldn't, if I was sitting with a crowd, I don't know, I like the idea of, if I'm precinct 7 and I want to see how somebody voted, I like the idea of, your recommendation, but
But I don't know how you're gonna still see it. How are you gonna see it? What's the difference?
Because on TV, you could,
You know,
you'd have a map on TV, you could
Yeah.
say, here's 1, 2, 3,
can
4,
watch them raise their
5, 6,
hands.
7,
Absolutely.
8, 9, and you can
It's-
see.
It's
Yeah.
not going to make a bit of difference what we think.
well, it may
I
not,
think
but
town
it's-
meeting's going to decide for themselves what they want.
Well, unless,
Well, our
Really?
recommendation carries some weight.
I don't think
Otherwise, why
unless it
would we
does.
make the recommendations?
I don't intend to make a recommendation
I just
on
think
this
that
one.
this is, a lottery here. Okay, where you gonna sit? I got a middle seat. I'm in
Well,
here
we got-
longer, I get an aisle seat. I mean, come
well,
on.
he started last year, Julian got the department heads up front, I don't see any reason, we're not going to recommend it.
Well,
I don't
it's
know.
up to you.
We're gonna make that decision. That's what we're here for.
Should I make a motion?
You can make any motion you want, sure.
I
That's-
move that we recommend Article 13.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any more discussion on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. So we're not gonna recommend it. Okay.
Fair enough.
Next one, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate,
No, not that one.
oh, wait a minute, I'm
The
sorry.
next one.
To fund to fund remaining Win 1 debt obligations via a debt exclusion ballot question, to see if the town will vote to advise the Board of Selectmen to place a question on the spring 2013 annual town election ballot to fund the remaining outstanding debt for the financing of Win 1 as a debt exclusion under the provisions of Proposition 2.5. And further, if the question is approved by the majority of the voters of the town of Falmouth, by Falmouth Board of Selectmen, shall immediately order the permanent termination of the operations of both Win 1 and Win 2, or act on any relative thereof, Catherine Elder and others. My personal belief is that we have, the board has 3 articles moving forward that would accomplish this and Win 2, and we plan on having those articles that are supported by the Board of Selectmen. We don't have all the information yet to make a positive recommendation on our own article, but this would be a competing article, and I believe this is really aimed at Win 1 versus Win 2. Okay, go ahead.
Well, there's no debt on Wind 2, because we got the federal grant for that.
That's not necessarily true.
Okay. Enlighten me.
It hasn't been confirmed
Has
yet.
not been confirmed yet.
That came up in our discussions with the state officials.
Okay, so the
And
grant may need
because
to
if
be
a
paid back,
turbine,
is what
if
we're
you
saying.
had the debt, but then the turbine isn't operating,
Right.
does that mean that you can still just not pay the money? So we've asked them to contact the ARA people and confirm the fact that either there is still an obligation on the debt or there isn't. So we're waiting to hear that. So we don't know that.
So in other words, if we don't operate it, we might be on the hook for it.
We might be on the hook for it.
We don't know that yet, but so that's kind of, we can't assume it.
Right.
Well, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
In this letter, which I think I've shown you copies, why did Therese Murray put this sentence in? Over the past 3 months, we have worked with Falmouth and Mass DEP to obtain the completion certificate for Wind 2, which could save the town upwards of $5 million in any instance the turbine does not continue to comply with its current operation.
Comply in comply means mitigation. Complete removal would be something else. Follow the, we don't have an answer, is what I'm saying to you.
Okay.
She wrote that there, but we still don't have an answer. And, mitigation would be one thing, meaning if we curtailed versus nothing, so.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, too, if I may, this does not provide any funds for Wind 1 dismantling and removal, which the board has provided for in your warrant articles. So were this to go forward, you'd pay down the debt and you'd have a turbine standing there with no funds set aside for the substantial cost to dismantle and remove.
I thought we put RFPs out for that. No, we didn't yet?
This is a petitioner's article, David. Let's stay on the petitioner's article. We have our own article, that's what I'm saying.
I'm also a little concerned about ordering the immediate termination if we're trying to sell these turbines, and to keep them operating is important, to keep the lubrication and making sure that they actually are sellable. And if this article passed, it would say that we had to stop using them immediately, and that may not make them sellable.
I tend to disagree with you, because I think if our articles pass, we would stop operation of the turbines the day after the election, too. That was my assumption.
It's not the as I understand it, that was not the recommendation of anyone dealing with the turbines, that if you turn them off immediately and don't run them for 2 months, you may have eliminated any value they have to anybody. That you need to keep them operating at there was not agreement as to what that was, but they need to be spinning at some point. Not necessarily producing much electricity, but on a regular basis.
They need to be lubricated, basically, probably, right? Is that what it is? So, I mean, we can find that part out. No, this is a board discussion on this tonight, sorry.
The only problem with that, though, I guess we're sort of grasping at straws on that one, because honestly, lubrication or not, these things were sitting in storage for years before we finally bought them, and I imagine that they're probably sealed bearings, because there's nobody going up there and greasing them on a daily basis either. So I'd be hard-pressed to believe that having them shut down for a couple of months is going to somehow destroy their value overnight.
Here's my bottom line. Do we want competing articles? Do we want to recommend?
I don't think this is competing. I think this is complementary. I think it says the same thing that we're doing in other places, and if it doesn't say the same thing, maybe our article should say the same thing, I guess is the way I look at it. So I would be inclined to recommend this.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
It's not that I don't want to support it, but if we support this and support our own articles, then it sends two different messages. And our message doesn't become clear. Our message includes much of this, but it isn't the same. So I think we have to be very clear about it, and we have to explain to town meeting, if we support both, well, which parts of each do we support? Heather has a comment.
Go ahead, Heather.
I think if the message we get from you is, I think you can indefinitely postpone this article with an explanation that points to your recommendations, which includes everything that's in here. And addresses all of the issues which this board is going to have to address.
Well, I know this, that if our articles pass town meeting, we do know that we're going to need to work hard to get them to pass the ballot. Any additional confusion about what's on the ballot and what articles are represented could prevent anything from passing on the ballot. And I want to make sure that what we recommend is successful. And I don't think we need to have competing scenarios here.
Well, I mean, suppose this article passed, suppose we recommended it. But the ballot questions are going to be based on the thinking around the articles in general, which relate to removing, relocating, what's the other word? Reusing or selling, because that was part of it too, I think. But the ballot question has to be worded entirely differently. So it seems to me that, with all due respect to Kathy, that we should be recommending our own articles, because, as Heather said, they do say the very same thing, only differently.
Well, does anyone want to make a motion here? Right, you would say one thing, Pat, you said.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, with about 10 minutes left in the meeting, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that legally we can't go past midnight because our meeting is noticed for the 4th and not the 5th. And we still have 2 items outstanding, numbers 5 and number 7, on the summary of actions.
We could do it next week, when we vote the recommendations.
Well,
We
we're
could-
just trying to give Heather some direction here. She'd have to write up.
I just want to make sure that you're aware of the outstanding items on the agenda versus the recommendations and that discussion. And
What are your outstanding?
items number 5 and number 7 on the summary of actions were still held but not voted one way or the other by this board.
5 was approved request for, does the board want to table what we're currently doing? Let me take a vote on that first.
I'd make a motion that we table the current discussion and return to the summary of actions.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, so we'll take up the summary of actions,
I put a hold on this, Mr. Chairman.
number
Only
5.
that we remind the event planners that they can't park on Main Street at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday when they have this. I know they know that, and they have shuttle buses. They have people parking at the Lawrence School and the Mullen School, and then they have the shuttle buses. But we want to remind them to make sure that their runners don't park on Main
Okay,
Street.
so you want to,
But I approve it, yeah,
you want
just,
to make a motion to approve, but remind,
but remind the event planners about no parking on Main Street.
do I have a second on that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
And I held 7 only because we had an email from Samantha today, Pearsall, can't think of her married name. She was working and her mother injured herself and couldn't be here. But she was also requesting a fee waiver for this.
She needs to go through the entire process for the fee waiver.
So we'll have to let her know that she'd have to come back like next week or something, or get on the agenda again for a fee waiver.
We'll have, is this for Falmouth High School?
No, this is the run for Jack Pearsall, you know, the young kid who was killed by a drunk driver over in Mashpee. And this is the second year they're having this, and they run from the high school to Trotting Park Field. And so it's only like a mile, and then they have some sort of a ceremony at Trotting Park. But there is a fee, and
Right,
she
right.
requested that. So we could approve the event, and then
Okay.
have Diane notify her
Well,
that
right,
she'd have to follow the process for a fee waiver.
okay. We have a motion,
Second.
second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And that was the end of those. So we have,
I move that we take our discussion of the warrant recommendations off the table.
a motion. Do I have a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yep.
make a suggestion for,
You were just taking time to think, weren't you?
no, just trying to move this thing along. Article 15, perhaps if we recommend indefinite postponement, but the board, the recommendation have some wording to the effect that the board obviously agrees with the petitioners, and that's why we have the other 3 articles on the special, and we ask town meeting to approve those 3 articles on the special town meeting,
Kind of what
Well,
Heather
I-
just
I-
said, right?
basically.
Well,
Okay.
I don't think we can say we agree with the petitioner. I
Well-
mean, you'd have to recommend the article if you want to say
We
that.
we have our own articles that basically do
the same
accomplish
thing.
the same goal.
I think we could also say that our articles have the necessary language to be able to transfer the debt, and this one does not.
And this-
that's the reason that we're saying, please support our articles. We support the intent of this article, but our article does what it has to do from a legal point of view.
Okay, so
That works.
that works, you make that motion then?
Do we need a motion for that? Or is
Yeah,
it-
so she can write that, so the motion would be indefinite
Well,
postponement.
we're going to vote these recommendations
Okay,
next
all right,
week.
okay,
So
okay.
we don't have to
All
vote
right,
them, we
okay.
just need to give others some
Okay,
direction.
Article 18, David, you were talking to the technician.
Yeah, we had voted and had that removed, Mr. Chairman.
No,
Couple
we
weeks ago.
voted, didn't we vote the
No.
positions?
The reason that's in here is you adopted the warrant, and subsequently you removed it. So
Right.
the motion, the main motion will delete it, but it has to be in here.
Okay, do you understand, is that fine, David? You
Okay.
understand? All right. So that's how we would do that
Okay, you
motion?
delete it in your main motion.
Okay. 24, sum of money for funding,
24 is the
Tonight?
wastewater one we
Yeah.
saw
they
tonight.
waste,
Okay.
yeah.
25 is the water one we saw
Right.
tonight.
26,
We did that
as
too.
we did tonight, 27,
Springboro Road.
declare Spring Bars Road surplus. Will that still be under the Board of Selectmen's?
Yes.
Pardon me? Jurisdiction?
It allows the Board of Selectmen to dispose of the property, so the town meeting declares it surplus and allows the Board of Selectmen. You're the only body that can do that.
Okay, all right. So we're going through this whole process of Cape Cod Commission and what have you, this just adds the final piece, so if, I would suggest that we try to recommend this, but in a fashion there. Heather, you've been good with that?
Yep.
Town would vote to amend the Code of Falmouth entitled Rental Property Fees.
Yeah, that's.
That gives you authority over fees.
Right.
Okay? And,
19?
then on number 19, eminent domain.
That's the Chase parcel.
Shoot.
Protects the watershed of the, chute.
Oh,
of the,
yeah,
water
by the
treatment
water
or
treatment,
water plant.
by the Long Pond.
Watershed
Can we have some idea of how much, I mean, you know, would we know the cost for next week?
You will. Appraisal's
And
underway
and
now.
then
You'll
what
know
what the
$4,000.
impact would be to the taxpayers?
Not yet. The appraisal's underway.
I know, but will
Prior
we
to
have
town
that
meeting.
next week?
Not
Not,
yet. Maybe.
so if we won't have that,
You might want to indefinitely postpone it and wait till you
That's
have
what I'm
P&S.
saying.
That's, in fact, I would recommend that's the procedure you go through.
I would feel more comfortable, especially, I know,
Yeah.
we have to make a recommendation, it would be a definite postponement, that we would come forward with it if we get an appraisal, and what the taxes would be on that.
I think you can indicate that you're hopeful that you'll have a positive recommendation on the floor, but at this point, you do not have a purchase and sale agreement with the owner.
Okay.
So that could be the language.
Okay. Number 20, Mill Road parking lot,
Same.
that's, I don't know if
We
we're
may
there
not
yet.
have,
Quick.
we won't have it by then?
No, we had to do an RFP. It's not due in until the end of this week.
Oh,
So it's the
so we
same
can wait till
IP,
next week.
subject
Yeah,
to
same action.
recommendation.
Yeah.
Right.
Appropriate sum, next is Article 21, fund existing debt obligations, authorized Article
It's the wind
14,
turbine.
the wind turbine,
21,
22.
23.
and 23, they're all wind turbine articles?
Yeah.
that-
Yep.
You can those up to Heather, I think those are great.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
We have 4 minutes to spare. Does the town manager have a quick report?
I do. I have a quick one, Mr. Chairman. Over the past few weeks, I've joined Jennifer Petit and the Finance Committee for meetings on multiple occasions in regard to their important work on the FY14 budget, as well as considering town meeting warrant articles with financial impact. The board's capital advisory committees continue to meet regularly. We referred to that, Selectmen Putnam and Jones and their work as well. The next meeting is this Thursday, March 7th, in preparation for a concluding report to the board. And lastly, this past Friday, I and Heather Harper participated in a kickoff for a month's celebration of reading by the reading classes at the North Falmouth Elementary School. And I enjoyed reading Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go. Mrs. Brown's second grade class, and some other staff members joined us in that effort as well. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
All right, does any other board member have any reports that they would like to present? Anything else?
I'm going to wait a couple, which I have a long one, but real quickly, I'm getting 2 calls from Lower Davisville. The residents receiving a notice from NSTAR who intend to come out, put blue ribbons on the trees. They're going to move a bunch of trees, but they have hired a environmentally safe arborist, they call it. The people are calling me, afraid they're going to come out there, just take these trees down, but they're going to have to come in front of us for hearings. Is that correct?
Depends on the trees.
I received a
They were all
similar
by the
call,
sidewalk.
yeah.
I would think they were ours, but it's because of the power lines, and they said they're going to leave a stump 2 to 3 inches high when they're done. I'm trying to tell these people they'll be in front of us for a hearing. Is that not going to be, how do we find out?
I'll have to check with the Parks Department.
And I made that
Probably only if it's on
recommendation
town,
that they
town-owned
talk
property.
to the tree warden.
All right.
Okay, so I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all those in
Second. Yep.
favor? Aye, opposed? Where you going, Dabble?
Is that yours?
Nestled in a classic New England setting amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.
Welcome to Falmouth. If you're a visitor, this is where surf and sun meet for fun. If you're a resident, this is where you'll find the businesses and the resources necessary to fill all of your needs. If you're a business person, this can be your home. Join with other men and women who work together to make this a sustainable economy year-round. Welcome to Falmouth, Cape Cod.